If you are just joining us here, welcome to the MV Book Festival 2025. Before I go any further, please turn off your cell phones. You can still take pictures. Thank you for coming and for supporting our authors today and for your appreciation of great writing. We're so happy that you're here. The way to support this festival and the authors that participate in it is to buy their books from the Bunch of Grapes bookstore, which is located over there. And don't buy them on Amazon, not on your Kindle, but buy it here and go meet the author after the talk and have him sign your book. Book signings, this is the last session. I was going to say they take place after every session, but it will. And today's author will be signing his book immediately following this in the book signing tent, which is over there. The author will take questions from the audience at the end of the discussion. So when asking a question, please line up behind one of the two microphones in the aisle. Ask a question. Do not make long statements, please, and let others have a chance to speak and let the author speak. So once again, before I go into introductions, please turn off your cell phones. So this afternoon, we're honored to welcome Jonathan Capehart to the MV Book Festival to discuss his book, Yet Here I Am, with his dear friend and former book festival participant, Valerie Jarrett. Jonathan Capehart is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and former associate editor at the Washington Post. Host of the Capehart podcast, MSNBC's The Saturday Show and The Sunday Show, he is a regular contributor to PBS NewsHour's Brooks and Capehart segment. In his new book, Yet... in his new book, Yet Here I Am, Lessons from a Black Man's Search for Home, Capehart recounts powerful stories from his life about embracing identity, picking battles, seizing opportunity, and finding his voice. The Honorable Valerie Jarrett is CEO of the Obama Foundation, where she leads the development of its cultural center in Chicago and oversees programs that empower civic leadership worldwide. A former senior advisor to President Obama and author of the New York Times bestseller, Finding My Voice, she also serves on numerous corporate and nonprofit boards and is a senior distinguished fellow at the University of Chicago Law School. Please join me in welcoming them both.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to be back here. I'm delighted to be back on Martha's Vineyard, my home away from home. And I'm especially delighted to be here in conversation with my dear friend, Jonathan Capehart. So I just looked up his age because I wasn't sure how old he is. He's 58. I said, really? Oh, my gosh.
It's like, oh, my God.
I know. He doesn't look it at all. But the reason I was looking it up, because we're here, obviously, to talk about his New York Times best-selling book. But at 58, some might think that's kind of young to write a memoir. And so I want to begin with, if you would, share with the audience why now.
So thank you very much, Valerie. And thank you all very much for spending a Sunday afternoon with us and with me. And Valerie called this a home away from home, meaning the island. And now I get to call this a home away from home because of Valerie. And if you haven't read the book, you will find that, Valerie would say to me for years, you should come to the vineyard. You should come to the vineyard. And when we finally started coming, I understood that her telling me to come to the vineyard was like telling me to come home. And so that's what Martha's Vineyard has become for me and for my husband, Nick. So thank you all very much. So during Trump 1.0, I needed a break from the Ferris wheel merry-go-round of what that first administration was like. And I decided one weekend to finally take the stories that were in my head for years from my summers in North Carolina with my grandparents and get them from my head and onto a screen. Stories that as I got older, I appreciated more and more. When I was growing up, I went to Catholic school during the school year. But then my mother would take me down south to rural North Carolina to spend it with my grandparents, where my grandmother was a Jehovah's Witness. And so witnessing with my grandmother all those summers, I saw things, met people, did things that just became indelible memories that I decided, you know what, I need to get these down. And so I started writing, and then I spent the entire weekend writing what was known as the Down South chapter. I just called it Down South. And I sent it to a bunch of friends, and 3 friends in particular, April Ryan, Joy Reid, and Tamron Hall. They each came back and said, oh my God, this is so beautiful, you have to keep going. April Ryan, as I'm sure you will not be surprised, hounded me every time she saw me. Are you still writing? You need an agent. Your story needs to get out there. This book needs to be, you need to write this book. And finally, I was able to write the book.
Well, he said, finally, I was able to write the book, as though that was an easy thing to do. For some people, writing comes easily. For me, it doesn't. It's a labor of love. And I know for you, too. So share, if you will, with the audience a little bit about just how you wrote it. And then we're going to come back and talk about what you learned from what you wrote.
So if you've read anything that I've written, certainly from the Washington Post, you know my writing can be very personal, because I began to understand that people could understand certainly the cultural conversations we were having, especially during the Obama years, through someone. And I figured, I began to understand that people viewed me as their trusted Sherpa through, the minefield of race. And so, of course, I would write about, well, here's how I view it from my perspective as a black man. Here's some stories from my childhood or from adulthood to help you understand why this is such a flashpoint in the conversation. So writing personally was never an issue, never a problem. It was writing long. When you're a columnist, at the Daily News, I had 550 words to tell a story. At the Washington Post, I had 750, maybe 800 to tell a story, write a column. When you're writing a book, you have as much room as you need, although I was supposed to write 80,000 words and I gave 96,000 words. So the editing process was really painful as I saw stories chopped out and I had to figure out how to weave them back in. But it was fun. For me, writing is so much fun. It's like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle where one half of the puzzle is crisp blue sky and the other half is green grass.
Might it have been fun because you went to Italy to write it?
I mean, that helped. And not just once, a couple of times. July 2019, I spent an entire month in Rome writing. And then, as you well know, in 24, we were at a little conference in Tuscany, and I tacked on 5 extra days in Rome at a favorite hotel with a balcony and wrote one particular chapter, and it was wonderful that it happened there. So for me, writing it's fun. It's finding the right words, the right phrases, the right imagery to bring the reader along so that they too can see what I'm writing about. That's the fun of writing.
So you mentioned the Washington Post. I didn't mention the Washington Post.
I worked there.
I'm just saying you brought the subject up, and so I don't want there to be an elephant in the room.
I'm fully ready to ignore the elephant, even though we're under a tent.
That was good. That was really good. Well, we're not going to ignore it because I have the microphone. And first of all, I have to say, I spent most of my life with Jonathan interviewing me, and so this is just delicious.
I know, this is weird.
Because I didn't share it with him, the questions ahead of time, and I said, well, conversation will go wherever it goes. I didn't want him to prep too much. So speaking of the elephant in the tent, so this was a hard week. You left the Washington Post. You'd been there
18 years, 5 months, and 16 days.
So that's a long period of a professional life to devote to something that you took quite personally, and I know how much you cared about what you did there and what you, and as you said, the Sherpa that got many of us through difficult times, and you were a translator, an anger manager, you did all kinds of stuff. What was this week like for you, and why'd you leave?
This week was tough. It's still hard to believe that I spent that much time in one place. When you read the book, you will see that there was a 5-year stretch before I went to the Post where I seemed rather aimless. I had, on average, a job a year for 5 years. And then to get to the Washington Post and be there for almost 2 decades. When I first saw it in print, Jonathan Capehart, who spent nearly 2 decades at the Washington Post, it was like a punch in the face. Like, oh my God, I've been there a long time. And it was fun, but to have it come to almost an abrupt end. I think I was telling you earlier that on Friday, my first official day as a former Washington Post employee, I was a bit of a zombie. It sort of took me by surprise. I mean, I saw it coming. I knew it was coming because the deadline was the 31st to take the buyout. And but still, I still am processing it, as if you can tell.
Well, so for the audience, what could you explain who was given the buyout, why you took the buyout, why this seemed the right time to separate from this institution that had become such an important part of your career?
So I think it was about February, Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, decided that the direction of the opinion section should focus on the twin pillars of personal liberties and free markets. My editor then, David Shipley, had tried to stop that from happening, didn't succeed, and resigned. And so then we were like, well, what does this mean? To my ear, my writing does not fit into personal liberties and free markets. And so that, to me, began sort of the countdown. And then when the new editor was selected, he put out a video where he talked about the twin pillars, but then also said, we will do so unapologetically patriotic. We'll be unapologetically patriotic in presenting these twin pillars. And and we will write about it with optimism. And I mean, you can't be unapologetically patriotic and only see the one half of the glass. And also, I argue that it is patriotic to hold a mirror up to the nation and her people and her president.
Hear, hear.
And especially when the Constitution gives me the right to do so. It demands that I do so both as a journalist and as a citizen. And so when the publisher sent an email out to the entire opinion section offering a buyout, everyone was offered a buyout. I mean, I took that as a sign from God. You're going to move in this direction and you are offering me the opportunity to leave with a sack of cash, to be perfectly blunt. I thought about it, and I didn't have to think that long about it. I'm going to be honest. But that wasn't the only thing. The entire opinion section was offered a buyout. The entire video department was offered a buyout. Anyone at the Washington Post for 10 years or longer was offered a buyout. So the last month, from June 16th right through July 31st, we were getting emails about the people who had decided to take the buyout. And the talent drain, the brain drain, the expertise and knowledge has just been allowed to walk out the door. And so for me, the decision was easy. And I have no regrets, but you don't spend nearly 2 decades at an institution doing what you love and then leave it and not feel some kind of way about it. And so I feel some kind of way about it now, but ask me in a couple days.
Well, I was going to ask you one more question about the Post, which is why you resigned from the editorial board, but I think I'm going to say read the book and find out. So there's more to the story, but enough said about the Washington Post. We're going to move back to the book. So you dedicated the book to your mom.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. For you, Mom, right?
Yep,
For mom. Not to mom, for mom. So why? And tell us about your mom.
You know, I had not thought about that I'd written for mom instead of to mom. And maybe that's because, you know, as you will read in the book, if you haven't already, my father died when I was 4 months old. So it was just the two of us until she remarried when I was 16. And so our relationship was mother-son, but there are tinges of, you know, siblings, because we kind of grew up together. And so as you read in the book, my mother figures prominently everywhere in the book, primarily because she was the one who never said, there are 2 words my mother never said to me, which in hindsight was probably the most important thing she ever did. She never said to me, "You can't." And this was important because I was and remain a nerdy kid who at the age of 10 had become hooked on the Today Show. And you have to understand, I was a big tattletale when I was a kid, telling everybody's business. I think I write in the book about the letter that I wrote to a relative informing her of her husband's infidelity. Yeah. I was maybe 9 or 10. And I, you know, wrote this letter, "Dear redacted, hi, how are you? I am fine. Redacted came to visit, and he had a nice looking lady with him. Okay, hope you're well." And then 2 days later, you know, when the mail worked like that, my grandmother, a phone call came in early. You could hear the phone ring. Grandma answers the phone. "Hello? Oh, hi. What? 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 Okay, bye-bye." She hangs up the phone, and then I can hear the feet coming. And the door whips open, and my career as a child tattletaler ended there. But as a result of watching the Today Show, I saw that there were these people who told other people's business for a living. And so I was like, you know, I want to be a news commentator when I grow up. But here's the reason why my mother never saying "you can't" is so important. There was no one in my family who was a journalist, a writer, on television or in television. So when I would tell anyone who would listen that this is what I wanted to do, that was a perfect opportunity for my mother to plant seeds of doubt, saying, "Well, how are you going to do that?" Or, "Ooh, that's going to be really tough." Instead, she would say, "Oh, yeah? Well, I'm sure that's what you're going to do." Or, "Oh, I know you're going to do it." And I had no roadmap for any of the things that I have been able to do. And so for me, I guess that's why it's for mom instead of to mom, because, you know, my story isn't possible without her.
Pretty nice. I told you. I told him in the car coming over, I said, "I'm going to make you cry."
Yeah. Good luck.
Talk
I think
about Mom.
this is the secret competition here.
Well, look, your mom is an amazing person, and you're so fortunate that she's still with us. But when you write a book that's deeply personal, maybe reflect a bit about what were some of the passages or topics where you thought, should I really put this in? And how did your mom feel? Were there any parts that made her uncomfortable? Were there any parts that you thought, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, and then you put them in anyway? And what'd you leave out?
Oh my God, there's a lot.
Because Mom's not here today, so what?
Right. Well, here's the thing. So when I wrote the first 10 chapters, my publisher said, send them to me. And so I sent them to the publisher, but I also gave them to my husband. And I asked my mother, do you want to see them? And she said, yes. And then I thought, oh, hell. That's the last thing I need is yet another set of eyes and another mouthy editor. Then she comes back and says, no, first she said no. Then she said yes. And I thought, oh, God. Okay, fine. And then she FaceTimed me and she said, you know what? No. I don't want to read it because I know me. I'll read something. It'll make me upset. And that's all I will think about until this book comes out. So I'll read it when it comes out. I was like, wow, thank you very much. So I had two sort of literary guardian angels writing this book. Katharine Graham and her book, Personal History. I was so impressed that a woman of her stature, one of the most powerful women in the country, and certainly the most powerful woman in journalism at the time, wrote a book so revealing, introspective, about her insecurities, everything. And then fast forward 20 years, and Charles Blow's Fire Shut Up in My Bones was another book written the same way. It sort of told me why Charles's columns for the New York Times were so impassioned. And I thought, if I ever write a book, those are going to be that's what I'm going to do. And so there wasn't really anything where I thought, I'm not going to tell that story or I'm not going to go down that road. Instead, I thought, if I'm going to write a memoir, I want people to know and understand the real me. And that's warts and all. There are two chapters in particular with interesting titles. Chapter 8, the title of that chapter is Hide Your Porn Well. That is my coming out story to my mom, the very hilarious opening. And then there's another chapter that it's like two expletives, F and S. And it's the 5 years from 2002 to 2007, where everything fell apart. My professional life fell apart, personal life fell apart, and I write all about it. I go there, just if anything, to show people what I went through, and then what happened when I got that phone call from Fred Hyatt, then the editorial page editor of the Washington Post, on January 5th, 2007, and how that one phone call changed my life and changed the trajectory of everything.
There are so many people, obviously it's turned out here today because they respect and look up to you. There are people who have hung on your every word. I would venture to say there are probably people whose lives you've saved. And so when you think about sharing your story, where you are now coming out from the role of being either a commentator or a reporter, you're the story. How does that feel for you? How did that switch? When you first saw this book in print, which is different than finishing it, because now it's like people are going to read it for sure. Right. How did that make you feel?
Well, it's strange being the one being interviewed. It's odd. It's odd being interviewed, but the reaction to the book has been beyond what I expected. Someone asked me halfway through the first part of the book tour, has it met your expectations? And I said, I had no expectations. All I wanted was just to get the book out. And I was serious when I said, while I was writing it, all I hoped was that someone would buy the book.
Nick bought it, I heard. Oh, we should say, Nick, your husband, put your hand up, wave, Nick. Everybody's happy to see you, too. I heard he bought a copy. And obviously a lot more than Nick bought
right,
the book. Yes.
But what's been even more, I don't know. I can't even find the words. But the events that I've done already, to see all the faces here, Kansas City was sold out, Austin was sold out, Philadelphia was sold out, Baltimore had 600 seats, 550 of them were taken, and we know this because the family that sponsors the author series that brought me in, they bought the books, and everyone who registers gets a book. And that's the event that I brought my mother to. And so she got to see it with her own eyes.
What was her reaction?
She was shocked. I mean, I was shocked too. That was week 2 of the book tour. And just the outpouring from people, a lot of people hadn't read it by then. Some had. But now I'm getting emails from people, messages on social media from people with just the most generous words about my book and what they read and what it meant to them and what they took from it. And that's all I wanted, was for people to read my story and hopefully see, if not relate to what I wrote, see a piece of themselves in what I wrote, and hopefully maybe learn from the lessons that I learned while writing the book. I mean, there are 3. Whenever anyone asks you what you want, tell them. The other one is go where your talents are wanted, which is one I'm reliving now. And then the third is everything we do in life is an audition for something else. We just don't know what for yet. And that's, again, I'm going through that now. But you know, the reaction from people who will recite those lines back to me, that's made, you know, writing this book, and particularly last summer when I was here in the vineyard and not able to enjoy days like this because I was hunkered over a table working on edits, that made it all worthwhile.
This would be a good moment for you to, if you would be willing, share one of your favorite passages with the audience. And I think it's apropos because we're here on Martha's Vineyard. I've been coming since I was 10, suffice to say, a long time. And one of the reasons why I call it my home away from home is that I've just always felt comfortable and welcomed here. You walk down the street and everybody says hello. People of color have always been welcomed here. My great-grandfather worked here one summer when he was studying at MIT. And so it's a place where I think a lot of people from all over the world call their home away from home. But it does bring up an issue of race, which you talk about a lot, not just in your book, but throughout your life. So how about share a page or two?
Sure. So when I was growing up, I had, especially since I am from the first generation after de jure freedom in the United States, born exactly 2 years to the day after the enactment of the 3 years to the day of the 64 Civil Rights Act, and almost 2 years after Lyndon Johnson signed the 65 Voting Rights Act. So as I write in the book, my cousin Rita and I, when we were playing in the yard in North Carolina, we were the first generation in our family that didn't have to pick cotton. And so I viewed myself as part of this new generation, an ambassador to the race for, you know, I'm going to help bring everyone together. And we lived in Newark, and we moved when I was 10 and then again when I was 12 to this town called Hazlitt in New Jersey. For folks who might be from New Jersey, that's exit 117. And so I want to read about, I had lots of great friends. But Hazlitt is also where I learned how to be black in white spaces. So, and for those of you who have a book, this is page 50. Hazlitt was also where I began to learn how to be black in white spaces. Blackness is always at the mercy of someone else's judgment. You can be too black, not black enough, or not black at all. And I've run the range my entire life. Some black people are eager to take away my black card. Some white people would rather I not mention my race at all. I was playing with my friends near the tennis courts at the other end of the apartment complex. I don't remember what we were talking about exactly, but we were laughing, telling little jokes. What I do remember is my contribution to the levity. "Well, I'm going to carry my black ass down there," I said, employing a bit of phrasing common in black households and utterly unfamiliar to my white friends. "What does race have to do with this?" one friend snapped. "Nothing specifically, and everything culturally." They had no idea what black meant in that sense. To them, I was invoking race where it didn't belong. To me, I was treating friends like family. In our families, black is used for comedic effect, or to put an exclamation mark on a warning. Mom, like all black parents and relatives, was adept at the latter. "Don't you ever, as long as you're black," was a favorite preface for one of Mom's admonitions against doing any number of offenses. Black ass is used in multiple ways, especially to grab one's attention. One of Mom's favorites was, "You better bring your black ass here right now," or "Your black ass is gonna get left if you don't hurry up." My use of black ass was clearly comedic, but in feeling comfortable with my white friends, I violated an unspoken agreement with an unspoken expectation. I was not black at all. The burden was mine to glide effortlessly between my black home and family to the whiter world. The rules of the unspoken agreement are designed for maximum white comfort with black presence, which means we must constantly prove to white people, especially those who don't know us, that we are following their rules. Hence, my mother's mantra, that is the mantra in every African American household. You have to work twice as hard to be considered just as good and just as qualified as them. If you are ever considered such, know that it comes grudgingly. And even then, the whiter world will remind you of where it believes your place to be.
And yet, here I am. That takes us right to the title. Now, I know, as every author does, you struggle over the title of your book. And we are going to come to some questions in a minute. I have two more of my own, but talk about the title. Yeah, I think it's perfect. It sums up so much, but how did you get there? What did you leave on the cutting room floor? Why was that where you actually settled in?
So the original title was Black Boys Like Me, because it's the penultimate sentence in the book. And I thought that, that's where I was coming from. And the original photograph on the cover was a black and white photo of me doing my radio show. I wasn't a disc jockey. I was the Les Nessman of Carleton College. I was the news director of KRLX, and it's me with the headphones speaking into the mic. And my comms guy said to me, "Okay, first thing, we got to change the title, and we need a new photograph for the cover." And so Paul recommended Beowulf Sheehan, fantastic photographer. He asked to read the manuscript, and he knew that we were looking for a new title. So he reads it, and then we get on the phone to talk about concepts for the new cover. And he says, this is how he talks. He goes, "So I understand you're looking for a new title. And I actually think that your title should be the very last sentence in your book. And yet, here I am." The moment he said it, a chill went through me, because I was like, that's it. That tells the entire story. And that is how we got the title of the book. But there's also one thing, for those of you who have a book with you, there's an Easter egg on the cover. And we did this on purpose. We did this photo shoot. He said, "Bring multiple outfits," because every photo I've seen of you on the internet, you are always in a navy blue blazer and a tie. And I think we need to do something different. And so I brought a white T-shirt. We did photographs in me in the T-shirt. And I mean, they were fine, but I looked like I was trying too hard. No one was going to believe that I would actually be in a V-neck T-shirt. Not at the beach, out in public. No. So we settled on an open-collared white shirt, and I brought a French cuff shirt and multiple cufflinks. And there's a set of cufflinks that I'm especially attached to because I bought them here on the island at the Featherstone Gallery. And they were cufflinks. Well, I don't want to give it away, but I thought I showed them to him and I said, I think this works perfectly with my story. He said, oh, yeah, no, I like that. And so we put them in and I'm posing, as you see. And then I said, Beowulf, let's give the viewer an Easter egg. Let's turn her so that she too is looking directly at the camera. And if you look, I see you're looking at the cover. Turn it the right way. Yep, just like that. The cufflinks are the image of Harriet Tubman. And I wanted to do that because even though I'm not related to Harriet Tubman, but as we like to say, we are our ancestors' wildest dream. Harriet Tubman, because of what she did, because of what Frederick Douglass did, because of what so many people did, my story is possible.
Which is the perfect segue into the last question I want to ask before we take some questions. And that is that there is a spirit of optimism, resilience, grit, humility, and humor that runs throughout your life and your book. And you still have this sense of we are in the process of perfecting our union. And I think to a lot of people in this current climate, they're nervous or afraid or traumatized. That's too much about me. Sorry. I think it would be helpful for you to give folks a reason for why you feel optimistic, given the nature of what's going on, not just in the United States, but globally right now.
If you don't mind,
Read again.
I'm going to read because I have the perfect answer to your question. And as any writer, I'm much better in writing than I am in speaking. In his epic Pulitzer Prize-winning biography of Frederick Douglass, Yale history professor David Blight wrote a passage that was simple in its execution but sweeping in its scope and gave me the perspective I needed and still rely on to give me the hope that we will get through this being the first Trump administration. Here's the paragraph. The orator and writer lived to see and interpret Black emancipation, to work actively for women's rights long before they were achieved, to realize the civil rights triumphs and tragedies of Reconstruction, and to witness and contribute to America's economic and international expansion in the Gilded Age. He lived to the age of lynching and Jim Crow laws, when America collapsed into retreat from the very victories and revolutions in race relations he had helped to win. What gave me hope, in Blight's words, was the sweep of Douglass's life. A man who was born a slave and escaped, who was a celebrated orator against the sin of slavery and saw the end of that evil institution. Douglass played a part in the nation reaching toward its founding ideals during Reconstruction. And then the great man lived long enough to see all the gains he fought for be reversed by Congress, the courts, and the president during the terror of the Jim Crow era. My story is proof that Douglass's fight was not lost, that as bad as things are, they won't stay that way. I am a descendant of slaves whose parents were born and raised in the segregated Jim Crow South. My cousins and I are the first generation in our family who didn't have to pick cotton. My story is the story of an only child mama's boy who had dreams of being a journalist and no roadmap for how to achieve them. I'm a Black man who wrote for the Washington Post, anchors a show on MSNBC, and serves as a political analyst on PBS NewsHour. And I'm an out gay man who was able to marry the man I love and have the ceremony officiated by the Attorney General of the United States, who made a key determination that made it possible. A more perfect union we do not yet have. But notice how the framers crafted that phrase in the preamble of the Constitution. A more perfect union in and of itself is an aspiration, a destination that is never quite reached. For a perfect union can never be achieved as long as people are left out, are not allowed to fully participate. Through our individual acts and collective action, we, the people, make this a more perfect union. I firmly believe this because my story is a testament to it. Hard work and the gumption. See, you're going to make me cry now.
I knew it.
I knew it. It took me 15 minutes in the audiobook to get through this paragraph. So
Take your time.
So bear with me. Hard work and the gumption to push through doors I never dreamed existed put me on a path to meet people I never should have met in a life that I never should have been able to live. Statistics and popular myths say black boys like me don't reach these heights, and yet here I am.
I knew we'd get him. I knew we'd get him. What a perfect passage. So now, questions for the audience. Don't be shy, and remember, no speeches, just questions. And if you would introduce yourself.
Barbara Plesser from Oak Bluffs, 18 years. Many of us in the audience, of course, are watching MSNBC constantly, and we heard about scary things about it being bought out or Lawrence this and that and all that stuff, you know. Tell us whatever you can tell us about what's going on, you know, corporate-wise, and this stability of the operation, and any other gossip you want to share.
I wonder how long it would get to someone asking a question about gossip. I used to joke that the C in MSNBC stood for chaos. MSNBC, in my portfolio of everything that I do, is the most stable place where I work. And I don't say that as a joke, it's serious. Yes, MSNBC, CNBC, and other cable properties that used to be of Comcast have been spun off into a new company called Versant. And in the fall, MSNBC will physically separate from NBC News. But what that means is, in an industry that's contracting, we're in the middle of hiring hundreds of people to start to staff our own news gathering operation. Rebecca Cutler, the new president of MSNBC, when she reformatted the program schedule, now there was a lot of upset about people whose shows were canceled, and a lot of people feared that, you know, voices of color were being silenced. What people didn't focus on was the fact that she's the one who created the show The Weekend. Michael Steele, Simone Sanders Townsend, and Alicia Menendez. She moved them from The Weekend to prime time at 7 o'clock in Joy Reid's old spot. So you've got 3 people of color anchoring a show in prime time. Then she put in me, Eugene Daniels, and Jackie Alamany into The Weekend spot. And what people didn't focus on was that not only do you have 2 black men who are co-hosting a show, but 2 out gay black men married to a man from each Dakota. Eugene's husband is from South Dakota. My husband is from North Dakota. Also, Eugene's husband went to Carleton. I went to Carleton. And then in the evening, you have Weekend Prime. Eamon Moldeen, Antonia Hilton, Catherine Rampell, Elise Jordan. All sorts of voices that are being elevated and amplified within the network. And so MSNBC is doing very well. And once we are officially separated from NBC News, It will be a scary time because we will officially be on our own, but that gives us an opportunity to show you, the viewer, what we can do, and I think we're doing that now. So don't worry about us.
Other questions? Great question. Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question. You answered actually the first question when you talked about editing, who you went to, and with trepidation you were going to ask your mother. You answered that part. The follow-up is, has your mother read it, and what's her response been?
My mother has read the book. Well, she listened to the audiobook. She walks every morning 5 or 6 miles, and so she listened. And early on, I asked her what she thought, and she said, "It's really good, but the first chapter made me very sad." And when you read the first chapter, you will understand why. But she said she really liked it.
You didn't have to edit anything.
No. Well, remember, she opted not to read it before publication, which was great.
Other questions? Yeah.
There's another one over here.
I see you. Yep.
Hi, Trey Hairston, Jackson, Mississippi. I am on the board of a digital newsroom called Deep South Today. And as we see for-profit journalism and newspapers contracting, we see the nonprofit space beginning to expand. Based on where we are now in the world of Trump 2.0, is truth-telling over? Do we go back, or do we move forward?
We have no choice but to move forward. Truth-telling is never going to go away. Truth-telling is what always gets us through the terrible times. There have always been terrible times, but truth always figures out how to get through it. And that's how we're going to get through it. I mean, one of the saving graces of this time that we're in is that our people are getting their news from all sorts of sources and are able to get news out without the filters of, establishment media or even government. And so the fact that you are in not-for-profit media and that you're growing, and that is fantastic, especially when local journalism has been dying. Mm-hmm. And now that we see that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is going to close, the implications, not just for PBS and NPR, but for those local stations that are their affiliates, that's where the most damage is going to occur. And it's going to be newsrooms like yours and the other not-for-profit newsrooms that I hope will pop up as a result. That's going to be the saving grace of journalism writ large, but also the saving grace of those local communities who are depending on you now, but are going to depend on those newsrooms that end up popping up. At least that's what I hope. Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Well, this old lady is wondering if the Washington Post, which has been, able to reveal a lot of things, if they're not going to be able to do that now, is the New York Times going to be one of the only papers that's going to tell us what's happening?
So I want to be clear about something when it comes to the Washington Post. Those twin pillars of personal liberties and free markets, that is for the opinion section. And again, Jeff Bezos as the owner of the paper, Will Lewis as the publisher of the paper, that is their right. That is the one section of the paper where they can exert whatever influence, direction that they want. Where you should worry is if they start affecting news coverage in the news pages. And that has not happened. And my my bellwether will be if you start reading in Oliver Darcy's status, or in Puck rumors of people on the news side being upset about the way the editor and the publisher are shaping stories. You're not seeing any of that. But I'm keeping my eye on folks like Carol Leonnig, the multiple Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter who is the best in the business. She is still there. There are other people, terrific reporters on the news side who are still there. And I understand a lot of people have canceled their subscriptions to the Washington Post, but their journalism deserves to be supported. So while I understand the concern about the direction of the Washington Post, especially the opinion pages, I am not worried about the direction of the Washington Post when it comes to the news pages, at least as we sit here talking right now.
Jonathan, I want to say thank you for a gift to us, not just for your mom, but for all of us who've enjoyed the book. I encourage all of you who have not yet purchased it to do so. Jonathan will be in the back signing books for a bit, but not too long, so don't preach too much to him. A lot of people, as I know, won't ask a lot of questions here, but they get the author one-on-one, and the next thing you know. So we're going to have some people there helping move things along, but I know he's looking forward to meeting many of you. Any last words you'd like to offer to the audience before we retire to the back?
The only thing is, again, thank you very much for coming out and spending part of your Sunday with me and with us. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to interrupt his their standing ovation, but there's a paragraph in the book I want to read, if you'll let me. Valerie Jarrett and her cousin Ann Walker Marchant, who threw a welcome to Washington party when I first moved to town, told me several times over the years, you should come to the vineyard. They and their extended family have been going for generations. Having spent several summers there, I now understand that to be told to come to the vineyard is to be told to come home. Thank you for coming home, and we're so happy you're here. And with that, I want to send people to buy the book and to go to the book signing tent, because it really is a lovely book, and you should read it. And you'll learn so much about him.
Maybe too much.